All right, gamers and players, it's time to talk about the big open secret that nobody really wants to talk about or acknowledge because this completely dismantles the entire narrative that's been propping up regarding Nintendo properties over the past several years, right? In order to downplay these highly successful, highly lucrative Nintendo releases, game journos, pretendos, and shills have turned to one catch-all solution. Some ridiculous claim that is reaching so far that Monkey D. Luffy would be proud. No one's talking about it! Every single time, whether it's Super Mario Bros. Wonder, or Fire Emblem Engage, or The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, the true Game of the Year of 2023, these people have come out religiously, like a mantra, trying to say, nobody's talking about any of these games. Never mind that Tears of the Kingdom is now the second highest selling Zelda ever made. Never mind how popular and successful that Super Mario Bros. Wonder is. Never mind that Fire Emblem Engage's sales are way higher than any in the series pre-Awakening, right? No, all of these games are complete and abject failures, and Nintendo is on the way out. The cope being that people are bored of Nintendo Switch. They're anxious to move on from Nintendo Switch. And all they want to hear about is Nintendo Switch 2 or the Switch Pro or whatever they're calling it this weekend, right? The cope was that these games were not doing as well as titles like Baldur's Gate 3 or Astrobot, right? The cope, Astrobot in particular, is really interesting because if you actually look at how much Astrobot was talked about, much like Hi-Fi Rush, it was like one of the most heavily shilled games of the year, right? Everyone was talking about it. Everyone was covering it. Everyone was giving it these glowing reviews. You know, it has like these really insanely high scores on Metacritic. It is the platformer of the generation. A lot of people were coming out and trying to say it was better than Mario. A statement that's completely laughable to anybody who actually plays Mario games, but it was something that the establishment was trying to do, right? They were desperately trying to pass off Astrobot as some mega giga hit, to the point where you had people like claiming that it was outselling Mario and that it was this new PlayStation icon and that it was one of the year's best hits, right? The Game of the Year 2024, Astrobot. This generic, uninspired 3D platformer that somehow got outdone by Nintendo games released in the GameCube days, right? This game is a knockoff of Mario Sunshine. This game is not even as good as Mario Galaxy, and yet we're supposed to believe this is some giga awesome mega hit for PlayStation owners. Like, this game, it's so talked about. Like, I bet the sales numbers are really big and impressive. Oh wait, no, we can look at them online and see that the game has bombed, right? Nobody cares about it. Nobody plays it. Nobody cares about Astrobot, other than terminally online individuals who straight up get kickback checks from Sony for shilling their products. And I do think that really needs to be understood, right? When you compare Astrobot to Zelda, right, Echoes of Wisdom, you can clearly see Zelda has sold way more. It's a way better game. It has more content. It has more variety, right? The game is more original. It's creative. It's fun. People are actually discussing the game as a game, right? But because it doesn't have the same kind of shill campaign as Astrobot, because you don't have RGT85 and Arlo and fucking Mr. Medicare coming out and trying to say, this game is amazing, guys! Like, because Zelda doesn't have that, it leads to this weird illusion, which is very transparent and easy to see through, by the way. This illusion that Astrobot is way more popular than The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, because more people are talking about it. But when you take into account why people are talking about it, when you take into account just how they worship every PlayStation brand in existence, how these are the kind of people who unironically believe that Parappa the Rapper and Crash Bandicoot are gaming icons, right? When you take into account, like, just just how pro Sony the gaming scene has always been, you really realize that the claim that Astrobot is some like sleeper hit is just completely unfounded, right? It is a complete meme. As I mentioned earlier, this reminds me a lot of what happened with Hi-Fi Rush, right? Where we were told this was some amazing new IP from Tango Gameworks. It was a huge hit. It was a huge success. The company was expanding because it did so well. And then Microsoft just shuts them down like a year later because the game didn't do the numbers they wanted, right? People like to say that Microsoft didn't know what they were doing, that they didn't understand the potential of their game or the studio, and that they jumped the gun on that. But I think it's very clear what happened is that Microsoft put a ton of money and effort into promoting Hi-Fi Rush, shilling it, getting people to talk about it, and then it sold like 30, like it sold like it bombed, and there was no reason in supporting the game anymore. There was no reason in supporting the company anymore, right? After bomb after bomb after bomb, having another one in Hi-Fi Rush led to Microsoft closing the studio down. And nobody's going to remember this IP. Nobody's going to care about it. Nobody's going to remember Tango Gameworks. It was a major, major blemish in Shinji Mikame's career, right? This is not the best company he's worked for over his career, right? Hi-Fi Rush was always just a complete joke. And yet we were led to believe this was some massive success story, that this was some huge deal, that this was like the most creative, innovative, interesting new IP in this generation. When we saw Astral Chain, right, on Nintendo hardware, that go completely ignored by the gaming public, even though it was far better, has more content, better visuals, a better story, a more interesting setting. Astral Chain was amazing. And yet we're supposed to believe that like this Saturday morning cartoon just is somehow better just because it's not a Nintendo game. Again, like this really needs to be understood is that no matter what the actual numbers are, no matter how good the game actually is, the gaming community always rallies behind these mediocre third-party products that nobody really cares about, right? Astrobot is lame. Hi-Fi Rush is lame. Baldur's Gate 3, right? Again, the Baldur's Gate 3 is another good example. Like, people were saying this game sold like 33 million units in like a week, okay? The reality is like, it sold like 15 million units, which sounds impressive until you realize Tears of the Kingdom did outsell it. It did get more Game of the Year awards. People are still talking about Tears of the Kingdom and playing it, while Baldur's Gate 3 has been completely forgotten, right? Again, same general principle, right? Like Baldur's Gate 3 was weaponized against all these major Nintendo games that year. 2022 and 2023 were killer. And yet somehow everybody just turned the other way and focused all of their hype and attention on games that nobody cares about, right? Baldur's Gate 3 was a complete joke. It was that year's Astrobot. It is a perfect example of just how the gaming community is more interested in propping up mediocre products in order to easily cast aside for the next mediocre product, right? They're not actually interested in good, interesting games with fun mechanics, because if they were, they would be universally into Nintendo games. And that's kind of the issue, is that nobody wants to admit that Nintendo produces more high-quality products at a higher volume than anyone else in the industry. But no, we have to pretend that like, oh, this is the best Street Fighter ever. This is the best Tekken ever. This is Dragon's Dogma is not a disappointment. Please pay no attention to the fact that Itsuno left the company. Right? Pay no attention to the fact that Capcom is hiring the Castlevania cartoon guys to do the DC Devil May Cry cartoon, right? Please ignore like all these obvious red flags about how all these companies are just failing to deliver on all their major products. Please pretend that nobody is talking about Nintendo games, right? Please don't bring up the fact that Echoes of Wisdom has been extremely well received, right? Talk about Astrobot, talk about Silent Hill 2, talk about like anything other than the elephant in the room, in that Echoes of Wisdom is one of the best games of the year, coming out only a year after Tears of the Kingdom, which was one of the best games ever made, right? All the cope, all the damage control, all the shilling, like all of it amounted to jack shit. Like, not only did Tears of the Kingdom establish itself as one of the premier titles of 2023 alongside Fire Emblem Engage and Super Mario Bros. Wonder, not only did it establish itself as one of the all-time greats, it's gotten a follow-up from another studio that had their own unique take on Zelda, which a lot of people are really enamored with. Astrobot, in comparison, is going to be forgotten in less than a year, right? Like, again, I said this about Hi-Fi Rush, and I said this about Baldur's Gate 3, and it proved true for both. You're going to see the Game Awards come along. Jeff Keighley is going to, like, hype them up while ignoring all these better Nintendo games. And then you're just never going to hear about them again. You're never going to get a sequel. You're never going to get a follow-up. You're never going to... by the time... these games are just going to fade into obscurity because at their core, nobody really enjoyed them all that much.